MSN has ranted for over a year about Russian influence on the election. Why do they see no problem with Israel influence via the media, via APAC, Jewish lobby, and a Jewish American Senate?
I'm not. Can you repeat the question? Because I'm not.
Essentially, MSN, keeps talking, and a lot of liberal news sources keep talking about Russian influence over the election, right?
Right.
Now, why do they keep bringing that up about the Russian, people helping out the election, helping out Donald Trump, but they don't see a problem with Israel influence via the media? And as Nick has pointed out, that a lot of Jewish people are in the media and represented by, what was it, 2,000%, I think you said, Nick?
2,000% overrepresentation.
Okay, so first of all, the Russian narrative has been pretty much pushed by Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, James Comey. Like, these are not Jewish names. Yes, there are Jews among them. Like I keep saying, there are Jews among every group. So I don't believe that Jews are pushing the Russian narrative. I believe that leftists are. Secondly, I don't believe that there is a lack of Russian evidence of Russian influence anywhere. I believe that Russia has tried to influence. I believe every country tries to influence our elections. I believe that APAC is specifically a lobbying group that's set up to promote Israeli interests. And I think that they can do whatever they want. But as I've said the other day, that the relationship between Israel and America is a business one, as opposed to the foreign aid that's given to many others. So, and if we want to get into that, we can too, as Nick is obviously trying to smell his own fart.
To bring back to the heart of the question of the super chat, though, the heart is not, does it align with Hillary Clinton's interests? The question is, given that there are two countries out there who may have influenced the election, why do we only hear about Russia? Do you think that the fact that they are Jews in the media makes them not want to talk about Israel influence on the elections?
As I said, Israel's influence on the election is also out there for everyone to see as well. Because Nick never shuts up about it. All the people on his side never shut up about it. People talk about APAC all the time. In fact, Donald Trump spoke at APAC. So there's no lack of evidence that there's an Israel lobby in America. There's only the idea that all of a sudden that influence is something that people aren't upfront about. That there's
so you're essentially saying, if you want the Jewish perspective, listen to CNN, and if you want the non-Jewish perspective, listen to Nick's YouTube channel.
No, I'm saying that as I said before, I don't believe the Jewish interest is represented by CNN. I don't believe it's a monolith, that all Jews at CNN come together.
But you just said, I understand that they're defending the Jewish interest. That's what you just said.
No, I was talking about APAC. I was talking about APAC.
Okay.
Well, Halsey, if you want to start on Israel, I got to warn you, is this a path you want to go down? Is this something you really wanted to do? You really want to start?
Settle down. Settle down.
Sure.
I don't know.
Was this an imitation of Vegan Gains or something?
a little Sam Hyde. No, well, I mean, Will Chamberlain. Who is that other guy? Jacob Wool. Many have fallen on the Israel debate, but I mean, if you want to bring on the Israel stuff, let's do it. I'm game.
Okay, go ahead.
Game.
All JF's right. Laughing. He had to mute himself.
So here we go, my guy. All right. You say you're Jewish, and let me ask you before we start about Israel, do you believe that America should be put first? Do you believe that American interests should come first?
Yes, 100%.
Okay. So now we give Israel, since 2016, we started a 10-year agreement where we would give Israel $3.8 billion per year in foreign aid. That's the most foreign aid we give to any other country. We've given Israel the most foreign aid out of any other country since 1978. And I would simply...
Not true as well, but okay. That's actually not true, but okay.
All right. Well, we've given them, regardless, we've given them something in the ballpark of $244 billion. So you can squabble about the details, but $250 billion we've given Israel since the founding in 1948. I mean, that nobody disagrees with that. Do you think that they are serving our interests when they conduct the third most aggressive spying operation on American soil, when they sell our military technology to China, when they develop a clandestine nuclear program, they don't sign the NPT, they steal our uranium. I mean, on and on and on. You look at all these examples, and how can you sit there and say that you are America first, but then you also are a supporter of Israel and the aid that we give them?
Okay, let's unpack all of the bullshit that you just said. First of all, every bit of money that was given to Israel before 1989, or it was 86, I think, it was one of the two, I'm not sure of the actual date, were loans that were paid back in full. Secondly, after that, the memorandum of understanding that have been reached with subsequent governments, requires 73% of the money be spent here, and requires that all Israeli tech developed in military industries be given to America as American tech and produced here as American goods that Israel has to buy. No other country on the planet has this arrangement with Israel. In fact, Israel is the only one that gives America something for their aid. And you said the most foreign aid received every single year since then. The UN gets more money from Israel every year than Israel. NATO gets more money, and Afghanistan last year got more money than Israel.
Because we're at war with Afghanistan.
But what I'm saying is that you're saying that we give Israel all this money. We don't give Israel.
Yeah, but
get something.
NATO and the United Nations are not countries. I said Israel out of all other countries, and the only other country.
And as I just said, last year Afghanistan got more than Israel.
Yeah, which is kind of a special case, wouldn't you think? Don't you think?
But as I said, none of them give anything back. In fact, the European super society that you keep talking. Wait, I let you fucking talk. You let me talk.
Go ahead. All right, take it easy, fella. Take it easy,
you keep talking about Europe. We give money to Europe, which basically, again, why are you interrupting me if you're going to complain about me interrupting you?
Go ahead.
We give money to Europe, which supplements almost all of their military budget, hence why Donald Trump handed Angela Merkel a bill. And what we get out of it is the idea that they push socialism because they're able to afford it because of our aid. Israel's money is paid back to America 10 times over because of the tech that America gets absolute exclusive right to. And they get veto power over everybody Israel sells weapons to. So right now, there is a business relationship between Israel and America that you don't want to accept. But as I said, every dollar we give them, 73% of it has to be spent in America with American military tech given to them from America. So if you're talking about it being a jobs thing, then yes, I might be able to say to you that I don't like the idea of giving corporate welfare. But at the same time, you're talking about money that's only spent here. The other 27% is only spent on military tech research, which America has, again, 100% rights to. So I'd like to understand how we're giving Israel anything, but yet we're not giving to anyone else who doesn't give us anything in return.
Sure. Yeah. Well, number one, it's not from a jobs point of view. That's not where I'm coming from. But number two, and this is the argument I hear all the time. This is the argument I heard from Will Chamberlain and Jacob Wool. Well, they're spending all this money. They have, and I'll grant you that they have to spend a lot of it here. Actually, they get a much more favorable deal than any other country in terms of the amount of money, the amount of foreign aid that has to be spent on the American defense industry is much smaller for Israel than any other country. Most countries have a much higher percentage that they have to spend on U.S. military, but that's beside the point. If we wanted to subsidize our military, if we wanted to buy Israeli military technology, we could just do those things. We could have 100% of the money go to our defense industry if we just spent it here. We could buy their technology outright if we cared to. There's no reason we should be giving this money to them. And actually, if you look at the way the money is given to Israel, it's funny, you say before 86, it was loans and they were paid back in full. I don't know if that's totally true, but hypothetically, let's say it is. The way that the situation works now is that we give them loans. We don't give them grants, because if we gave them grants, we would have to station U.S. military there to oversee how the grants are spent. So we give them the money in loans, and then we cancel the loans. So we give them basically a grant, but without the oversight that comes with the grant. On top of that, unlike any other country in the world who gets U.S. foreign aid, Israel gets it in a lump sum. They get it at the beginning of the year in full. And what does that mean? Unlike other countries, Israel gets to use some of that money to invest in U.S. Treasury bonds. They get the money at the beginning of the year, and they get to buy our Treasury bonds and make interest off of the foreign aid money we give them. So we give them a loan, we cancel it, and then they make interest off of the loan that we gave them. So, you want to talk about provisions, that's number one, but it's not even that much money. Here is why I oppose it. It's $3.8 billion a year. And what we are doing, in effect, is rewarding a regime which actively hurts our interests, a rogue regime who actively hurts our interests in the Middle East and in the United States. They conduct, depending on who you ask, the second, the third, or the fourth most aggressive spying operation on U.S. soil behind only Russia and China, our two major adversaries when they spy on us. You look at, the wars in the Middle East that they've caused us to go in, the intelligence, the vaunted intelligence that we get in exchange for our money, which led us to war in Iraq, where there were no weapons of mass destruction. You look at how, and you say, that was another rich thing you said about how we sell our weapons to them. And you say, oh, the United States gets veto power over who they sell their weapons to. They've been caught red-handed every decade for the past 30 years, selling our military technology to China or other foreign adversaries. So, the idea that, they're really good with our technology. Just 5 years ago, they sold our tech to France, and then France sold it to China. And so our missile tech ended up in the hands of China. And so these are just a few examples of the things.
So wait a minute. You're actually saying that Israel sold it to France, and then France sold it to China.
Yep.
But yet it's Israel's fault for selling military tech to an American ally that America would have sold it to, because it's Israel's fault. Secondly, you keep saying,
because here's why. Because of the way the contract works. The way the contract works.
The contract. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Because the way the contract works is it's supposed to be that Israel is just supposed to stop with Israel, but then they sell it to France, and then France acts as a third party to sell it to China. So that is Israel's fault. If we give weapons to Israel and it ends up in the hands of China, it doesn't matter if it went through France. Our tech went into the hands of China. That technology was not intended to go into the hands of the French and then into China. So you kind of try and wiggle your way out of that one.
I'm not wiggling my way out of it. I'm saying America gives military tech to France just as much.
And also, you could even go ahead.
Sorry, I want to intervene just for 1 second here. Have you guys ever heard of Billy the Anti-Bully?
No.
No.
No. Okay. Well, he's a friend of the show, but he's asking a question here.
Yeah.
Do you believe Israel is responsible for their attack on the USS Liberty, as in it wasn't a misunderstanding but a deliberate act during wartime?
I do believe that.
Of course you do, but no, I don't.
Yeah. Well,
thanks, Billy, for thanks, Billy.
There's another example where, and that I don't usually use that one because, they still haven't declassified all the intelligence on that one. And you got to wonder why.
Yeah, exactly. You wonder why, because that's going to prove you right.
Yeah.
So you can make reference
why do they have anything to hide?
You can make reference to things that you don't know the answer to.
Well, no, that's why I don't use that one, because that one.
Yeah, you said I don't use it.
Because we have.
Yeah, I love how you keep doing that. You keep saying, I'm not going to use it. Then you use it and say, this is why I don't use it.
I didn't. Look, the commenter brought that one up. The reason that I don't come out right out of the gate with that one is because we don't have all the intelligence, even though I believe that Israel did do it. There's so much other evidence where we are beyond a shadow of a doubt certain that Israel was the culprit. You can look at the Levant affair.
The culprit? They admitted to it.
Yes.
They said they were sorry about it, that it was during a war. Oh, yes, they bombed a U.S. ship deliberately for no apparent reason.
They had a U.S. flag flying at it. No, not for no apparent reason.
Yes, because you could see a flag from a fighter.
Because it was a, you can. It was and it was one of the ships. Hey,
have you ever been on a plane? Are you that retarded that you can see a flag?
I'd like to hear Nick on what evidence he has, and then the answer by Alze.
Here's why. Because the Israelis were conducting a massacre, and that was a U.S. spy ship, and the Israelis didn't want us to know. Oh, it was for no reason. Why would they do that? Because the U.S. might have been privy to the atrocities that the Israelis were committing, the war crimes they were committing. You say, oh, well, they didn't know. This was an American ship. This was not an Egyptian ship. They have different ships, and it had an American flag flying it. You can ask the sailors who were on the ship that day. Many of them testify that it would have been impossible for the Israelis not to know. And these were people that were on the boat. You say, Nick, have you ever been in a plane? Why don't you ask the people that were there that day when they were under siege for hours and they had an American flag flying on there? It was an American ship, and they were telling them it was an American ship, and they blew it up anyway, and there's 130 lives. And you know what? I think there's probably a better case that the Israelis deliberately blew up that ship than a lot of other atrocities that happened in the past. And, people love to say, oh, well, the USS Liberty, the Levant affair, that was so long ago. Well, we're still paying for a lot of the atrocities that were hypothetically committed at other times. So I think it's very rich. I think the hypocrisy is very rich, my guy.
Oh yeah, because you just again spouted a whole bunch of bullshit,
Yeah,
and then you're using it as evidence that what you're saying is right. So as I said, if you've ever been on a plane, then you would say a flag is hard to see. Secondly, they admitted to doing it
for hours.
Thirdly, there was no massacres being committed. It was a war, which obviously you seem to think can be done in a very clean way, where wars can be fought and nobody gets killed. Thirdly, you love to say, oh my God, we're still paying for that. And there's classified information that we don't have. But you're making the assumption that that classified information proves your point. And that's where you're just spouting bullshit. And also the massacres that happened that only get documented, it seems, by these fringe right-wing sites that don't have anything to back it up.
From people that were on the ship, from people that were on
massacres. You said they were spying on massacres, not the Liberty that there were massacres going on.
Yeah,
but there were no. You have no evidence of that. You're not putting that out there. You're just saying, I know. I was there in the 60s.
Because, yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
I know.
No, you asked for the reason. You said they blew it up. You said they blew it up for no reason, and I told you the reason.
They were at war. It was flying. It was a ship in Egyptian waters.
Yeah, well, that's why. But that's why, though, because they were committing a war crime. And here's why. Because they had to kill a bunch of Egyptian prisoners of war so they could revert their troops up to their northern flank because they didn't have enough supplies up there. And, look, despite that, we could get into the what or the why. But again, this was a sustained attack on the USS Liberty. This wasn't a trigger-happy commander. This wasn't, whoops, we accidentally shot at you. This was a sustained attack. The Secretary of State at the time said he wasn't satisfied with their explanation. And why then did they cover up all of the evidence? Why did they cover it up? Why is it still not declassified today? People that were on the ship say that the
Israelis did it deliberately. Let's get into it some more. I got it. No problem.
I know it's a big. I know it's a silly.
You have shut up for a minute and let me talk for a second.
I know it's a big
talk for a second. You have a big fucking mouth. I get to talk for a second.
Let's hear Ozzy.
I get to talk for a second.
Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
Why is it declassified? You just said the Jews run America. They have all the influence they want.
Yeah, wrong.
Yet American, it's still declassified. It's still classified here. So all of a sudden, now the Jews have influence. They don't have influence. No, I'm not saying that they have any influence. They just have interest. Now all of a sudden, they have interest to classify something in 1967. You're claiming massacres that nobody claimed existed. You're claiming that the attack on the Liberty was sustained and they didn't know when you don't know.
Yeah, here's
because you weren't there. Yes, some people said that they just. That's the way that every single thing happens in history, unless someone says, I did it.
Pretty weak.
Oh, yeah, pretty weak. I see.
Pretty weak. Well, here. How about this?
Your bloviating is literally just saying, I know.
Yeah.
Because I was there. And you say, as long as I go, I was there. And you know what? You don't know. That's my point.
I know you think
but your point, Ozzy, is more than you don't know, right? You claim that there was no reason. That's a positive claim. If I was to ask you, just like Nick backed up his statement by the evidence that he believes in, what makes you think that there was no reason?
They admitted it, and the American government also said what happened. Both Israeli and American governments said it was an accident. Israel apologized and made restitution, and they moved on. So that's my evidence. Is that it's the
so you think it was accidental?
Well,
I do believe it was accidental.
Okay. All right. I see what you're saying, but Nick, you said it wasn't declassified?
Yeah. A lot of the evidence is not declassified, or a lot of the information about the attack is not declassified.
Has the amount of time to declassify information like that, has that time passed?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, like the JFK assassination evidence has been declassified recently. That was in 1963. This was in 1967. So, I mean, the evidence, this was what, 50 years ago? Absolutely.
No, that's just not true. So,
okay. Well, hear about this. And I know that it's, first of all, I have to say the kvetching.
Again, whenever anyone proves a point against you, you just have to say, "Oh, you're reading."
Let's hear Nick's response.
Okay, but again, if all he's going to do is say, "Yes, you can't be telling a fact because after all it's kvetching," then he in the same time says, "Whatever."
Well, it's just this nasally. It's so insufferable.
You're talking about people with nerd voices.
How about this? How about this? I got a quote for you, big guy. You're going to love this one. This is Dean Rusk, U.S. Secretary of State at the time of the incident, who said, quote, I was never satisfied with the Israeli explanation. Their sustained attack to disable and sink the Liberty precluded an assault by accident or some trigger-happy local commander. Through diplomatic channels, we refused to accept their explanations. I didn't believe them then, and I don't believe them to this day. The attack was outrageous. Secretary of State, but maybe you know more, right? Maybe you know more. Hey, you already acknowledged your prejudice.
You pointed one example. The official American and Israeli stories contradict that. So I'm saying you claim that you have evidence because one person said something, and I'm claiming that a lot of other people said something else. So if your evidence is that one person said something, then you're discounting what the official story is from both governments. So if both governments have said one thing and your one guy has said something else, that isn't evidence that you're right and I'm wrong. It's evidence that your one guy believes something differently, which happens all the time.
Secretary of State.
Yeah, exactly.
Alze, do you recognize that the governments, when they emit public statements, it's more aligned with interest than necessarily seeking for the truth?
I acknowledge that can happen, as well as a Secretary of State could do the same.
So what is the Secretaries of State interest in telling that story about his feelings, his belief about what happened?
I don't know what his interests were. I'm not him, nor have I asked him. What I'm saying is his one account does not carry more weight than anyone else.
It does carry more weight than some people. Would you agree that the Secretary of State is better positioned to have had information than the average citizen?
Yes, but then so is the governments of both sides, who are made up of Secretaries of Defense, Interior, the President, Congress, all of them. So I would say that their opinion carries some weight as well. So even if you want to discount that they could be lying, I say they could be lying, but I don't believe it. I believe the official account. And Nick is saying that just because this one guy said this and there's the classified information on it, therefore it points to the fact that they're guilty, is ridiculous. It's saying that just because he has other sources that say something, he's right. But what I'm saying is the official account says something different.
Okay, so I think that everyone here agrees that there is uncertainty in that case, but everyone has presented their evidence. I think that calling the Secretary of State in that moment of history a guy is big. Is big. I will tell you, Secretary of State revealing their personal thoughts about important war events, my ears would be all opened. Now, Andy, did we want to do a concluding statement and end the show at this point?
Yeah, the first thing I want to